So as Mike mentioned, the Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force was established in 1989. So we're celebrating our 35th annual meeting and 35 years of the task force. This has been a theme that's come through on the various meetings we've had this week, especially as we look back at the history of the task force and forward at where it's going. Next slide. So the 6 member jurisdictions of the task force, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. We have BC Ministry of the Environment, Washington Department of Ecology, California's Office of Spill Prevention and Response, which sits within Fish and Wildlife, Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, and Hawaii's Hazard Evaluation, which sits in the Department of Health. Here's a photo of the task force founding members on the shores of, you can see cleanup from the Exxon Valdez in the background, and this was in the spring of 1989. Perhaps some familiar faces, and if you have questions about who those folks are, I encourage you to talk to one of the task force members or come to me throughout the day. Next slide. So I know most of you are familiar with the task force and what it does, but we may have many new faces. Again, we have a lot of folks joining us virtually online. And so I just want to spend a few minutes sharing a bit about what the task force is and the type of work we do. So we share information on regional and national oil spill programs, oil spill policy, and emerging technologies within the member jurisdictions. We coordinate and facilitate projects, workshops, and forums on oil spill prevention, preparedness, and response. We help create tools and resources to foster and encourage best industry practices. We engage with our industry partners in spill prevention and response planning. We support federal policy initiatives that help prevent oil spills and protect resources at risk. And we conduct ongoing outreach and communications to share our accomplishments with partners, the public, and other stakeholders. And I feel honored to use the word our and we in these statements. Again, my role as executive coordinator is really supporting the good work of the member agencies and the member jurisdictions as they do this work throughout their own agencies and within their agencies and with their partners, and also collectively as the task force. So I really want to recognize the work of both the coordinating committee and the executives, and a myriad of working group members who are the heart of the task force and do this work, in addition to their day-to-day work in every aspect of spill prevention and response. Next slide. So I'll draw you to kind of a framing in our current strategic plan, and this is something that we've spent some time thinking about and working with this week. But the task force vision is no spilled oil, with a mission of working together to improve the Pacific Coast prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery from oil spills. And these 3 themes guide our work: a safe and clean environment, external partnership, and organizational well-being. What does that mean on a day-to-day? Next slide. So here's kind of 4 key areas of work. Or sorry, 5. Tracking data, sharing information, joint preparedness, action on priority issues, and engaging with partners. Before I get into each of these, next slide, I just want to recognize some changes that we've had over the course of about the last year and a half, or since the last annual meeting. I won't walk through all of these, but I want to reflect on a few folks that have transitioned off of the task force this year that did fantastic work. Sarah Bassick from Environment and Climate Change Canada, Tiffany Larson, ADC, Melinda Bruner, also with Alaska DC, and Lydia Emmer, who has transitioned off of the task force for a year to take on kind of an interim position. We're really fortunate to have Mike join us, and excited to welcome Lydia back when she's ready. And some new faces as well. So it's been really exciting to be able to bring some new energy into the task force and new ideas and enthusiasm for the collective work that we do. So Itamar Rodriguez from ADEC, as well as Teresa Melville, who you'll get a chance to meet this year shortly. I mentioned Mike Kuzinski, and you've had an opportunity to meet him as well. So please say hello to these folks if you haven't had an opportunity to do so yet. We also have 2 new members from BC Ministry and Environment, John Topolovec, who will be giving their jurisdictional updates, and Teague Clark, who've joined us as our Canadian partners. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a few of the things that have been highlights for the task force this year. I mentioned the sharing of information and data. So one thing that the task force has worked on now for about 11 years is tracking crude oil movement through the West Coast. We put out an annual report on our website of this data. It's just kind of a simple 2-page report with some tables and figures, and I encourage you to take a look at that. That's oilspilltaskforce.org. And we have both the 2022 and 23 oil spill data reports available on the website at this point. Next slide. We have 3 active working groups that have been meeting over the course of the last year. We have a research and development working group, which brings in both federal partners, industry partners, and academia on work related to research and development around spill response and modeling GRPs. So a broad range of conversation that fits into this R&D working group, but an opportunity to connect with folks outside of the jurisdictions as well. We have our Pacific Ocean Spill Prevention Education Team, or POSPET. That's a mouthful, but this is a working group that has been meeting since nearly the inception of the task force and focuses on small spills, boater outreach, that kind of marina and boater spill prevention efforts. Would really like to highlight the work of Sea Grant throughout the West Coast region and being active participants in this working group, as well as state agencies that work directly with our jurisdictional members. And the last active working group that we have is the Drills and Exercises working group. I would encourage folks online, if you participate in any of these working groups, put a hand up or post something in the chat. These working groups represent quite a number of people across different agencies and sectors, and our Drills and Exercises working group specifically are folks working at each of the member jurisdictions that either lead or participate in, do the important work of drills and exercises in their jurisdiction, and invite members when they can from industry or federal partners as issues arise that they would like to have those conversations with. So if there's interest in any of these working groups, I encourage you to reach out to any of the coordinating committee or executive members you know. I'll also make sure that you have my contact information, and for those of you in the room, I have some business cards out front, but find someone from a jurisdiction to chat with, and I would just encourage participation in any way in any of these working groups if you're interested. Next slide. One of the places that we highlight the work that we do kind of in the most succinct way, and I tend to point people to, is our annual report. So our annual report is available online, and we'll get links in the chat to all of these reports in the annual report. Encourage you to take a look. It highlights some recent case studies from this year, as well as achievements of the working groups. You'll see some familiar information in terms of the staff transition, but generally just a great place to go and understand what the task force is. And if you have other colleagues, electeds, folks that you're interested in sharing this information with, this is a great one-stop shop to learn about the work of the task force. Next slide. So I mentioned one of those themes that drive our work as organizational well-being or nurturing our organizational health as the task force. We've been fortunate to have conversations throughout this week about that. And I just want to point to some of the work that the coordinating committee and executives do. So the coordinating committee of the task force is represented by one or two individuals from each agency that meet on a monthly basis. They have an opportunity to talk about emerging issues, topics of interest, jurisdictional updates, what's happening in their jurisdictions in a way that they can share information and learn from one another about their jobs and the work that they do and coordinate in that way. So we have monthly meetings of the coordinating committee and quarterly meetings of the executives. We also spent some time this year finalizing and drilling a mutual aid agreement. I have been hearing from coordinating committee and executives that this is kind of one of the top achievements that they feel like they've had this year. I say finalized, this is a living document in the sense that there's always folks moving around, contact information changes, but the root of it is just really understanding how the process by which jurisdictions can share resources and coordinate with one another should they need to in the case of a spill. And so having this mutual aid agreement, this is something that the task force has had now for over a decade and a few opportunities to update it over time in a way that can be used and practiced on a regular basis in the case that it's needed at some point. Here's a photo from last year's annual meeting, an opportunity to get together at least once a year. I think it has been appreciated by the task force. So again, I appreciate you joining us today. Okay, and the last work that we do that I want to highlight, next slide, is just the work that we do with our partners. So the member agencies were able to meet yesterday with our federal partners. I have 6 US programs, but actually that's 9. So 9 federal agencies joined us yesterday and 3 Canadian programs. So really appreciate kind of the broad participation in that meeting. And it was really interesting to hear what folks are up to. And so thank you for joining us for that. The task force also participates in 2 industry-led science advisory groups, the American Petroleum Institute Spills Advisory Group, and we coordinate with the American Waterways Operators. So fortunate to have those relationships, and that's an important part of the task force is fostering those relationships across sectors. And we're here with every one of you today. So again, thanks for joining us. I hope that gives you a good grounding in who the task force is, both as an entity and individual agencies, and kind of the type of work that we do. I mentioned that the task force is really who sits on the task force, is the work of each of the agencies, the jurisdictions, and the individuals that do that work. So I hope that in hearing from many individuals today, throughout all of these sessions, it will help provide you a better perspective on the work of the task force and how the task force interacts with the work that you all do as our partners in this important in the important work of preparing for and preventing and responding to spills.